In the heart of the bustling city filled with passers-by, Lizzie adjusted her disguise in a dimly lit alley. With worn-out clothes and a hood covering her neatly styled hair, she barely recognized herself in the blurry reflection of a nearby storefront. Today, she wasn't the heiress of a vast fortune, but a woman disguised as a homeless person, easily overlooked by hurried pedestrians. Her heart pounded against her chest, not just because of the chill seeping through her thin clothes, but also from the tension of what she was about to do. She had meticulously planned every detail of this afternoon, knowing that the next few hours could change her life forever. In the hidden bag beneath her shabby coat, a small digital recorder was on, ready to capture every word of the planned confrontation. Slowly making her way towards the main street, Lizzie felt the weight of her decision. Each step brought her closer, not only to Charles, but to the truth about the man she loved. Today, she would find out if her suspicions were unfounded, or if her fiancé was truly the monster she feared he might be. Hiding in the shadow of a building entrance, she watched, waiting for the moment to reveal herself. The stage was set. Her fate and Charles's would soon intertwine in the bustling streets under the indifferent gaze of strangers. Disguised and trembling slightly under the weight of her tattered clothes, Lizzie anxiously watched every passing face until she finally saw Charles approaching. He was immaculate in his business attire, talking on his cell phone with a clear and carefree laugh. Lizzie took a deep breath and approached, extending the cardboard cup she held. "Please, sir, can you help me with something to eat?" Her voice trembled, partly from the cold, partly from the contained emotion. Charles looked at her with a disgusted expression and quickly averted his gaze, clearly annoyed. "I don't have time for this. Don't bother me," he said, his voice as cold as the wind blowing through the streets. Lizzie persisted, following the script she had rehearsed in her mind countless times. "Just a coin, please. Just that. I'm hungry." Charles abruptly stopped, his face contorting in anger as he stared at the woman before him. Not recognizing Lizzie, his fiancée, he leaned in, his face hardened by fury. "Do you think this is how life works? That you can just ask and receive without giving anything in return? Get out of my way!" He pushed her shoulder forcefully, causing her to stumble backward. Lizzie, standing her ground, looked up, trying to capture every nuance of his behavior on the hidden recorder. Charles, however, exceeded expectations of cruelty. "You're the reason this city is sinking. People like you are a cancer," he spat in her face, the cold spit against her skin making her shudder. The people around briefly stopped, looking disapprovingly, but none intervened. Murmurs of disgust and shaking heads could be heard, but everyone continued on their way, leaving Lizzie alone, humiliated and disgusted on the cold sidewalk. Charles walked away without looking back, continuing his phone conversation as if nothing had happened. When he disappeared from view, an elderly woman, dressed as shabbily as Lizzie, approached. Her face was marked by time, but her eyes shone with rare kindness. "My child, don't mind that jerk. I'll share what little I got today with you," she said, extending a piece of hard but evidently precious bread. Overwhelmed by emotion and the gesture of kindness, Lizzie began to cry uncontrollably. Words failed her, and tears flowed freely down her face. The woman embraced her, a hug worth more than any words. "It's going to be okay, my dear. It's going to be okay." In the midst of pain and humiliation, a glimpse of humanity touched her deeply, reminding Lizzie of the world she wanted to believe in, a stark contrast to the cruel reality that Charles had shown. After the devastating encounter with Charles, Lizzie knew it was time to act. The video recorded during their confrontation was the proof she needed to unmask the man who almost became her husband. Determined, she organized a dinner under the pretext of celebrating their future marriage, inviting friends, family, and members of the local community, including some influential figures who admired Charles for his supposed philanthropy. As the guests began to arrive, Lizzie felt the weight of truth on her shoulders. The room was elegantly decorated, the atmosphere laden with superficial joy, which would soon give way to tension. After dinner, when everyone was gathered in the main room, Lizzie stood up and said, "Thank you all for being here today," she began, her voice clear and calm. "Before we proceed with the celebrations, there's something important I need to share with all of you." Lizzie turned on the projector, and the lights dimmed. On the screen, Charles's video began to play, showing him treating her with disdain and violence, his harsh words and spit launched at her face. Reactions were instant as the lights came back on. Some guests looked at Charles with horror. Others seemed unable to believe what they were seeing. Charles, caught off guard, quickly stood up, his chair falling backward. "Lizzie, what does this mean? Is this some kind of joke?" His voice was a mixture of anger and confusion. "There's nothing funny about this, Charles," Lizzie replied firmly, facing him. "I wanted everyone to see who you really are. I can't marry someone who treats others with such contempt." Charles tried to argue, looking around for support, but found only disapproving stares. "You're insane! This was staged! That's not me," Charles said. "The camera doesn't lie, Charles. You did this. You treated me like this when you thought I was just another homeless person on the street." Lizzie remained calm, though her heart was racing. The guests began to murmur among themselves, some getting up and leaving, others discussing what they had just witnessed. Charles, realizing he couldn't salvage the situation, grabbed his coat and left the room without looking back. Lizzie, though shaken, felt a wave of relief and strength. She had done the right thing, not just for herself, but for everyone Charles could have deceived in the future. In the days following the shocking revelation, Charles's life fell apart. Social media and local newspapers were filled with debates and condemnations of his behavior. Longtime friends and business partners cut ties, fearing that association with him would tarnish their reputations. Charles desperately tried to defend himself, but his words sounded hollow in the face of the irrefutable evidence Lizzie had exposed. Every attempt at explanation only sank him further into the mire of public disgrace. Meanwhile, Lizzie felt revitalized by a new mission. Strengthened by the adversity she had faced, she doubled down on her philanthropic efforts, allocating large sums of her fortune to shelters, education programs, and support for the homeless. Her determination to make a difference grew even stronger, and the community began to see her not just as an heiress, but as a true leader and inspiration. One day, moved by a sense of gratitude and determination, Lizzie returned to the street where she had been humiliated by Charles. She searched for the elderly woman who had offered her comfort and shared her bread on that dark day. Lizzie asked several people in the area, describing the woman, but the responses were always the same: a shrug, a confused look. No one seemed to notice or remember the old beggar. Disappointed, Lizzie sat on the same cold bench where she had cried, contemplating the invisibility of someone who, even in the shadows of society, had shown immense kindness. It was a painful reminder of how blindly many passed by the vulnerable. Back in her car as she drove home, Lizzie reflected on the irony of the situation. She, a woman who had almost lost everything because of a lie, found strength and purpose through the kindness of someone society chose to ignore. "I won't give up," Lizzie murmured to herself, a glint of determination in her eyes. "I'll find that woman and thank her, and I'll do more for people like her who are invisible to so many." Lizzie walked through the streets, revisiting the same alley where, months ago, her destiny had changed drastically. The cold wind seemed to cut through her thick coat as she searched for the elderly woman who had reached out to her when she needed it most. That's when she found her in a hidden corner, a tight space between two buildings where the woman lived under a large piece of cardboard. As she approached, Lizzie saw that the lady was not alone. Around her, 10 dogs of different sizes and breeds huddled close, sharing the warmth of old, worn-out blankets. The elderly woman shared pieces of bread with the animals, each receiving their portion with a gentleness and maternal care. Watching that scene, Lizzie felt tears welling up. The generosity of that woman amidst her own adversity was overwhelming. Hearing footsteps, the old lady looked up, surprised and somewhat frightened to see a well-dressed woman approaching her. "Oh, I'm sorry, ma'am. I'll leave here. I didn't mean to cause any trouble." The woman began to gather her things hastily, murmuring apologies. Lizzie quickly crouched down beside her, gently holding her calloused hands. "No, please don't go. I came here specifically to find you," Lizzie said, tears streaming down her face. "One day, you helped me when I was disguised as a homeless person, not knowing who I was. You shared with me what little you had, and you came to my aid when everyone else turned their backs." The woman looked at her with wide eyes, trying to understand the situation. "Today, I want to help you and your dogs. I'm that woman who was assaulted by a man when she asked for food. I'm not homeless, I'm wealthy, and from now on, I'm going to give you a new life." Lizzie embraced the elderly woman, who was visibly shaken, her hands trembling as she tried to take in Lizzie's words. The old woman slowly allowed herself to relax into the hug, her own eyes filling with tears. Do you really want to do this for me?" she asked, her voice weak with disbelief. "Yes, I promise," Lizzie affirmed, helping her to her feet. "Let's find a better place for you and your friends here," she said, stroking one of the dogs that had approached. Lizzie spent the afternoon arranging a temporary home for the old lady and her dogs at a local shelter, ensuring they would receive the necessary care while she prepared a more permanent solution. She knew this was just the beginning of her journey to repay the kindness that had been shown to her, but she was determined to make a difference in the life of the one who had helped her without expecting anything in return. If you enjoyed this exciting story, don't forget to leave your like and comment on what you thought in the comments. We want to hear your opinion. And if you have suggestions for stories or situations you'd like to see here, share them with us. And of course, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our amazing stories. Until next time,